her friends to contact the women and warn them away, but they showed up anyway. Esther refused to acknowledge their presence. While it was in one hand kind of a slap in the face that nobody knew about the, other women and his other children, it was kind of fortuitous because apparently Lou was $500,000 in debt when he died. As we've seen a lot of architects, these visionary architects. And so he was basically leaving his debt to his wife, Esther, and their daughter, Sue Ann. And Esther could not pay those debts off for 4 years after his death. And that's when the Pennsylvania legislature procured the money to buy all of Lou's records and drawings for $450,000. So all those are now in the archive. Esther gave one interview during her lifetime, and she did recall her life with Lou quite fondly. Perhaps she accepted him as he was. She certainly seemed to understand his faults. She said if he cared as much about money as he did about his art, he would have been a millionaire. So he was never known for his money management abilities, and he often lost money and commissions because he was constantly redesigning the plans. He was never satisfied, whether it be in his love life or in his professional life. Esther Kahn died in 1996. Wow. The daughter that he had with Louis Kahn is Sue Ann Kahn, is a classical flautist and a teacher.
Oh my gosh.
Anne Ting, his first mistress, died in 2011. Her daughter, Alexandra Ting, is an artist. And as I mentioned before, Harriet Pattison is still alive. The son that she shared with Kahn, Nathaniel, is an Academy Award-nominated documentary filmmaker.
Sure.
And Harriet is actually just now starting to get some of her due. She was recently made a fellow of the American Society of Landscape Architects, who did a oral history of her life. And that is available on YouTube if you want to look into her.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
One of her more well-known works, which was done in conjunction with Louis Kahn, was the Four Rivers Park, or Franklin Delano Roosevelt Park.
Is this in Philly?
This is in New York.
Oh.
Yeah, it's actually, I think, at the tip of Ellis Island. It's and it was just recently completed, like in the last decade. There were plans and that they never fall through with it, but they finally did. So I hope I'm right on that. I was looking at a map recently of New York and I saw it picked up on Google Maps, and I'm thinking it is at the tip of Ellis Island.
Okay.
Very, very interesting park. And she definitely had career triumphs on her own, so she should not be overshadowed by Louis' genius. So that is the end, folks.
Oh.
What are you reading or listening to this week?
So let's talk about what I'm listening to first. I was catching up on some 99% Invisible episodes and This American Life. There was one called The Magic Trick or something, but it was about magic, and like it brought me back because they talked about David Copperfield. So Ira Glass apparently was like a child magician, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
So he posted pictures of him in a cape, blah, blah, blah. Please Do Not Disturb is the book's called. And anyway, so they, and it's Ira, and then one of the correspondents was also apparently a magician when he was a child. And so they were sort of just reminiscing, and also, I think Ira's in his 50s, but maybe this other guy's younger, or I don't know, but something came up about David Copperfield, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, child me had a huge crush on David Copperfield.
I saw him. And I saw him when he came to my hometown.
I think I saw him too, and I don't know, it would have been in Minnesota, and I don't remember the context. I would have been very young, but I don't. Anyway, so I do remember when this was on the TV. It was also portrayed in the show The Americans, which I think is awesome, but it was when he made the Statue of Liberty disappear.
Oh, yeah.
So on This American Life episode, they find people associated with the trick, and they tell you how
he did it
works.
Oh, wow.
And so they called David Copperfield, and he was like apparently very gracious, but he would not tell, which of course don't tell. And he also said that he had people, like, for that trick and other tricks, they would put false explanations online so that if you looked it up, like, you didn't know if you were getting if this really happened or if it was like he would pay people to put incorrect descriptions. But I don't, in case anybody doesn't want to hear the spoiler, I won't say how he did it, but it's almost like when you know how he did it, it's almost more incredible because he had to fool an entire audience,
right?
Like an entire American television audience, as well as the people that were in the audience on Liberty Island. Is that what it's called? Anyway, on that island where she is.
Isn't Roosevelt Island?
I'm terrible.
One
I'm a
of
terrible
those
American.
islands in New York.
Don't write us how bad an American I am. So when you know what happened, it's more incredible. It's like, that's because like he didn't physically make it disappear, right? But when you know how he did it, it's like, that is so clever. Because he would have had to come up with how to do it. Like, first of all, this is going to be my trick. How am I going to make this happen? And then to do it, right? And to fool all these people, like, that's amazing. So, okay. So that's what I'm listening to. Also, there's another podcast called The Truth that is like mini webisodes, kind of like, what's that weird Black Mirror, which I've only seen a few episodes, but it's interesting, like little mini stories. Okay. Like they're each self-contained stories. There's 91 of them. So check that out. So this book that I read is called Please Do Not Disturb, by a gentleman named Robert Glancy. And he is, he's something. He is from, like, he lives in New Zealand now, but he was born in Africa and like Zimbabwe or something. Anyway, so he grew up in Africa. Zambia, not Zimbabwe. He was born in Zambia and raised in Malawi. And so he's like a white African, which I didn't like. And this, they talk about this in the book as well. Like, there are different, there's like expat, there's like English people and Scottish people. And anyway, like with Black Africans, and that sort of relationship is interesting, but it is a great book, and it's set in a fictional African nation, and they're preparing for what they call the big day. And it's when the old king, comes out and talks to his people. Like, it's one day a year. And so the book is a weaving together of different stories of people who either live there or are there for various reasons. There's an Irishman, and then there's a Scot, and then like there's like a native family that run the hotel, which is why it's called Please Do Not Disturb. But it's so, like, the voices are great. It's so well done. There's a little boy in it who's like recording people. Like, he has a dictaphone. And so he's going from person to person, like, recording. And then sometimes, like, he'll leave the dictaphone on accidentally. Like, he'll just leave it somewhere. And so it'll pick up things that, you as a reader are clued in on some of these backstories that, like, the characters don't know what's going on, but you do, sort of thing. Anyway, it's a really well done book. And it's one of them that I picked up, like, I just read the back and was interested, but I paid $2 for it at like a library book sale or something. And it was amazing. But I read that for fun, but the next book we're reading for book club, which was my pick that had been on my Goodreads list for a while, is called The Immortalists. And it's about 4 kids who find out that there's a psychic that can tell you your end. Like, she can tell you how you die. And so
never a good idea.
1969, and these 4 kids like go. I just started the book, but they go and they find out. And I just thought, like, I thought the premise was fascinating, and like, I can't wait to talk to my book club about it, because I just think that it'll make for a really good discussion.
That's true.
Because would you want to know?
No, right. And what would you do if you knew?
So, on one hand, you're like, well, yeah, because if you knew when, then you would be able to do everything you want to do before you die, right? Because if it's next year, you're like, well, that's how much time I have. I'm quitting my job. I'm traveling the world. And then I know I'm going to die. But do you want the mystery? Like, I feel like I'd want to know. Because I would need to plan, because I don't want to be one of those people who's like, oh, well, someday I'll get there, you know, because we're living longer or whatever. I'll be like, well, someday I'll go to whatever, Thailand, or someday I'll go to such and such, or someday I'll do this. Like, I don't want that, so I feel like I would want to know.
But I just kind of feel like you would feel like a ticking time bomb almost.
I don't know. I mean, but aren't we already? Right?
Supposedly.
So,
yeah. I am not really listening to, well, I continue to listen to audiobooks. I've kind of shifted away from podcasts and have been listening more to audiobooks. Although I am still listening to You Must Remember This.
Yeah.
And then the second season of Up and Vanished just started as well. So I've been listening to that. But on the book front, I just finished The Masterpiece by Fiona Davis. And
is it about a painting?
Actually, no. It is sort of. It's actually... so Fiona Davis is quite prolific. I swear she's putting out a book every 6 months. So she either is like able to like focus really, really well, or she had a bunch of books written and ready to publish. But basically they're written around iconic buildings in New York. So her first book was set at the Dakota apartment building in New York, which is where, of course, John Lennon was shot and killed.
Yeah.
It was about its construction and how it was the first luxury apartment building in New York.
We talked about the first apartment, but was it McKim made it? No, it wasn't. Because it's not the Stuyvesant. We talked about this. Like how it's erroneously thought to be one, but it's really whatever one that I was talking about.
I don't remember.
Anyway, sorry, I don't either. They all blend together.
And then the second one was set at the Barbizon Hotel for Women, which was where it was a women-only apartment complex in the pretty early on. At least the 20s or the 30s.
Where?
And it actually is still operating today.
Really?
Yeah, you can, and it's like, no men above.
Is this also in New York?
Yeah. It's like no men above a certain floor, and
but there's lots of cats there.
Possibly, yeah. And then the Masterpiece is set around Grand Central Terminal, as they explain, is not Grand Central Station. It is a terminal because the railroad line ends there. But there was actually an art school there. It's the Grand Central School of Art that operated for like 20-something years. And so it's kind of a mystery surrounding all her books are split like modern. There's a character from the modern, and not necessarily always modern, but like in this one particularly that's set in the late 20s and in the late 70s. So there's usually like a 50-year gap between the two characters or whatever. Cool. And so the late 70s was when Penn, on the heels of Penn Station being demolished, and they were trying to demolish Grand Central as well.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. And I just read it in an article and I was like,
really?
Crap.
Yeah. And so, like, Jackie O got involved and was very heavily involved in advocacy to keep it. And, of course, it was saved.
Yeah.
And was recently, the final restoration was completed maybe 30 years ago. Okay. Mid to late 90s.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it took them a while, so. Wow. And I'm very much looking forward to visiting it in 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
So...
you're almost there.
I know, I am. So
you made it.
And on that note, we are going to be shifting our recording schedule a little bit. I am starting grad school next week, and
Yay.
I got my syllabuses yesterday. And syllabi, that's right, syllabi, and it's going to get real, man. I bought a planner and was writing down all the due dates for stuff. So. We are not abandoning the podcast, but we are going to be modifying